One of the most common tasks that developers face when creating games is that they need objects to look at other objects. For example, you might be creating an enemy gun turret that should track the player and fire at them. Now in this case, we don't usually want the gun turret to chase or move towards the player. Typically the gun turret should stay in place, but what it should do is turn to face the player, tracking them as they move around. So I have a very basic scene set up here in which we have a capsule object that for now I'm going to take to represent the gun turret, and this cube object that I've called target, which for our purposes I'm going to assume is the player. What I want to do is to have this capsule object continually turn to face this cube wherever it moves. So if it moves, for example, all the way over here, then the capsule should turn to face that cube. So I need to create the code that is going to do that. So I'm going to bring in MonoDevelop into the viewport here, into MonoDevelop, and I'm just going to remove this line that we have in the update function because we don't need that. That simply turns the object which we created in the previous video. But I do want to create an additional variable. We have the transform component of this object. We need this in order to rotate the object, but I still need to access the transform component of the target object, the thing we should be looking at. So I'm going to create a new variable here. I'm going to call that public transform, and I'll call it target, like so. And I'm going to go back to Unity here. I'm going to save that code and go back to Unity. And when I select the capsule object here in the hierarchy panel, and I move over to the object inspector and have a look at the rotate to script, you can see that now we have a target field, which currently says none. All I need to do is drag and drop the target field into that slot to specify the target that we should face. I'm going to go back to MonoDevelop now, and inside the update function, I need to use a new function that's going to rotate this object to face the target. Now, thankfully, Unity provides us with a very convenient function built into the Quaternion class that can turn to face any direction that we want to look. So I'm going to choose this transform dot rotation. We've seen that before, and it's going to equal a completely new rotation. So I'm going to choose Quaternion dot, and again we get a range of functions that we can use to construct a quaternion. In this case, we have a function that is called look rotation, and it specifies a vector that we can use to specify the direction in which we should look. Notice the summary creates a rotation with the specified forward and upward directions. In this instance, we have only a forward vector, but notice that it's page 1 of 2. And if I press the down key, I beg your pardon, if I press the right hand key on the keyboard, again, we get the second argument, which is upwards. So it allows us to define a forward vector and an upward vector and construct a rotation based on those two values, and it will rotate our object to face that direction. And here we're going to see a very important feature, specifically vector subtraction. So I'm just going to choose look rotation and specify the first argument, which should be the direction, the forward direction that the gun turret should be looking in order to look at the target. So I'm going to go back to Unity for the moment. In order to determine the direction in which this capsule should be looking at this target, all I need to do is take the position of this target and subtract from it the position of the capsule. So we are using vector subtraction. When I subtract two vectors in this way, it gives me the difference between them. That is, it tells me a vector between the capsule and the cube, and this direction will always tell me where the cube is. So if I take the position of this and subtract the position of the capsule, it gives me a vector between, which represents the direction in which the capsule should be looking. So let's go back to MonoDevelop to implement this behavior. So for the look at rotation, the first argument should be the position of our target, target.position, and I should be subtracting our current position, our own position, which is this transform dot position. And the second expression should be the up vector. So for this, I'm going to specify vector3 dot up. Notice the first argument, really, once that expression is evaluated, it gives us the correct direction in which to look. And it really is that simple. Let me just save this code and go back to Unity to give this a test. So I'm going to press play on the toolbar. And when I do this and I move the cube, notice that the capsule is constantly turning to face that cube. I can even move it up and down. I can even grab that cube and move it behind the capsule, and it continues to track its position. It continues to look at that cube as it moves around the level. So that's splendid. We now have the ability to make one object face another, and that's a very important ability.